African heads of state who have had an audience with Russian President Vladimir Putin have raised sharply the issues of food security and access to markets during the first plenary session this morning. Ziyanda Ngcobo is in St. Petersburg and she joins us now for a debrief. And Ziyanda, we heard from the President of South Africa, who says the time of raising dust in South Africa and exporting raw materials is over. We should rather be looking at capacitating ourselves and exporting finished products.
Absolutely, Dudu, and I think it's very important and quite deliberate of our very own President Cyril Ramaphosa inserting the issue of the African Free Continental Trade Area into his speech. It's something that we've seen consistently coming up on all platforms that Ramaphosa addresses because of just how much this forms a large part of the theme of Agenda 2063. It's something that African leaders have continuously discussed, and it's also echoing what earlier presidents had emphasized, including Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who quite interestingly went against the grain and said, excuse my pun actually, that in Uganda there is no food crisis. In fact, he was decrying the issue of access to markets. So there's clearly an issue around, this issue of beneficiation and how Africa can really take up this role of not only exporting raw materials, but actually exporting, produced goods to the international market, but starting here in Africa. Let's listen to what Ramaphosa had to say earlier.
The African Continental Free Trade Area, once fully operational, will unlock the benefits of the continental market and generate mutually beneficial opportunities for both African and BRICS countries alike. As clearly articulated by other leaders who have spoken before me, but more especially the very wise words of President Museveni, African countries are shaping their own destinies as nation-states and as a continent. Our substantial resources must be harnessed first and foremost for Africa's benefit, to grow Africa's economies and to pursue sustainable development.
Do another issue that has also come up continuously is, of course, what cannot be ignored during the hosting of the summit, which is the current geopolitical tensions, in particular that conflict between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, Ramaphosa saying that the geopolitical tensions are having a negative impact on Africa, not necessarily, speaking in detail about the collapse, of course, of that Russian Black Sea grain deal or the offer that Vladimir Putin gave yesterday that he would be supplying in replacement of Ukraine of that grain to 6 African countries, reflecting and continuing, I think, finally South Africa having a clear stance on this issue of conflict, saying that negotiation and dialogue will continue to underpin the approach not only of South Africa, but the African continent when it comes to peace and security, and emphasizing that this summit continues to be pivotal in also bolstering relations and basically throwing forward, I should say, towards that BRICS summit that's taking place in Johannesburg next month. Let's listen to what our president reflected on earlier.
As part of Russia-Africa cooperation, we must repeat our call for existing global institutional mechanisms to be strengthened and reformed. Greater participation of our countries of the Global South will promote inclusiveness and engender trust. In this regard, the reform of the multilateral financial institutions, as well as the reform of the United Nations Security Council, remain a priority for us. It is totally unfair, inequitable, and unacceptable that a continent that represents 1.3 billion people continues to be not represented on the UN Security Council. In our interconnected world, we are all affected by conflict and instability in other parts of the world. We have a responsibility as nations to work for peace, to support peace building, and to lend our every effort to bring an end to conflict and war wherever it occurs.
Ziyanda, Ngcobo, thank you very much. Let's take you to